So in problem 8, we are given f of x and we are asked to find f prime of x as well as f double prime of x. So first of all, let's look at the information we are already given. It states that the function is periodic with domain R and range -1, 1. So now that we know this information, we can start trying to find f prime of x and f double prime of x. So we can see in f of x there are certain points of where the slope of f of x changes from positive to negative as well as negative to positive. So we know that these points in f prime of x will serve as critical points of where the graph of f prime of x crosses the x-axis. So why don't we start graphing? So we know that in f of x, when the slope is increasing, then the graph will be above the x-axis in f prime of x. And when the slope in f of x is decreasing, then we know that the graph in f prime of x will be below the x-axis. So let's graph that right now. So as you can see, we now have a rough sketch of the graph of f prime of x. Notice that the range is from -1 to 1, as stated in the criteria given in the beginning of the problem. Now, since we have f prime of x, we can move on to f double prime of x. So for f double prime of x, it's actually quite easy to find because we already have f prime of x, so we can use the same steps that we used in finding f prime of x with f of x and finding f double prime of x using f prime of x. So looking at the graph of f prime of x, we can see there are places where the slope is increasing and decreasing. And these areas in which the slope is changing from increasing to decreasing and decreasing to increasing will be the points of inflection on a graph of f double prime of x. So let's draw that. F double prime of x. So let's draw that. And since we already know that when the graph of f prime of x is increasing, the graph of f double prime of x will be above the x-axis. And when f prime of x is decreasing, we know that the graph of f double prime of x will be below the x-axis. So now let's proceed to graph f double prime of x. Make sure to keep in mind that the derivative of... So keep in mind that the slope of the graph of f double prime of x, the slope will change as the slope of f prime of x changes. So basically, what that means is when the slope of the graph of f prime of x is steep, the slope of the graph of f double prime of x is steep. And when it is not steep, the graph of f double prime of x will also be not steep, and so forth. So right now, we've graphed the graph of f double prime of x. Keep in mind that because the range is from -1 to 1, we cannot cross the horizontal asymptotes at -1 and 1. So now that we've found the graphs of f prime of x and f double prime of x, let's fix up our graphs a little bit.
Beautiful. And now we have the graphs for f prime of x and f double prime of x. Thank you for watching.